So the new Dragon Ball Super superhero arc has begun, and I'm here today to talk about some really cool stuff I noticed in the Dragon Ball Super manga drafts that dropped on the official website not long ago. So let's just jump straight into it. And it's important to keep in mind that Piccolo, despite the fact that we're seeing a scene that is very reminiscent of the scene that we saw in Dragon Ball Super Superhero of Piccolo picking up Pan, this is actually 3 months before the events of the film. So Piccolo has been picking up Pan for a while now, it seems. But this is the first page we got. I'm glad it's an opening shot of Piccolo because it's really, you could tell Toyo's really trying to honor the idea that this arc was heavily centered around Piccolo. This is really interesting to me that Piccolo scolds Videl and Gohan so harshly, because it really just goes to show how unaware Piccolo is of the fact that his antics aren't necessarily what is the norm on planet Earth in terms of raising your children, because this is normal for parents to have people pick up their children, especially if they're wealthy and they have jobs and they have stuff to do. This is actually a normal occurrence. This tells me that Piccolo's instincts in terms of his standards of parental guidance probably derives from the Namekian culture. He probably instinctually has a drive similar to the Elder Nameks who prepare the warrior Nameks for the trials that they'll go through in order to prove that they are worthy of attaining the Dragon Balls. Because on planet Namek, they have to go through 7 trials in order to have permission to use the Dragon Balls from all the Grand Elders. So Piccolo's attitude, it really kind of reminds me of someone who would be in charge of beating those warrior Namekians into shape. That's really what his attitude reminds me of, but that's not, as we'll see here in just a minute, Piccolo's not going to be able to train and treat Pan like he did Gohan, because not only is Piccolo more soft, but Pan is not going to tolerate it. So here we are, we've got the beginning of Pan and Piccolo's relationship as master and student, and I really like that Pan puts up the Saiyaman X3 mark here. She's got the 3 fingers up, basically suggesting that she's going to be Saiyaman X3, and I actually do think that might actually be a development in the future since they're hinting at it so hard. We'll see. But one thing I really want to call attention to here is the fact that in most cases, when a character decides they want to be a superhero, it doesn't last. So it might be likely that Pan decides to try and be a superhero at a young age, and she grows out of that phase probably quicker than the rest of the characters prior, including like Goten, Trunks, and Gohan. Because if you remember, by the end of Z, she is a martial artist. She's actually dressed up exactly like Goku. And I do think that something is going to happen within this arc to essentially play on that, to play on how Pan is as a character when we get to the end of Z. And actually, I've noticed that Toyotaro's art here actually looks way more reminiscent of Pan's appearance in the end of Z in terms of the overall art style. Dragon Ball Super Superhero, due to the 3D elements, she didn't really appear as though she did in the end of Z, but here she does. She is much more reminiscent of her appearance in terms of her face and everything. So Piccolo comments on the fact that, Gohan used to be Saiyaman, and then he basically points out that he has a hard time understanding how the Saiyans think, and everyone does, especially Dragon Ball fans, so Piccolo shouldn't feel upset about that. So then Pan tells Piccolo that the boys got in trouble, so they had to stop being superheroes, which, it makes sense because whenever they do fight Cell Max, they no longer use their Saiyaman X1 and X2 apparel. So this is essentially Toyotaro's way of explaining away the fact that Trunks and Goten didn't show up and immediately turn into Saiyaman X1 and 2, because they've essentially got out of their superhero antics by this point in the story. So I don't know if any of you followed me on Twitter, but I actually made this post about how every character in Goku's family falls from a cliff at some point in their life, and that includes Bardock, actually. And so I made this post hours before these leaks were released, so I just thought that was really interesting because it just so happened that they play on that in this scene, because this is a rite of passage for Goku's family. I've been saying for a really long time that Gohan Beast is essentially the end result of Piccolo's training, and it is demon themed. I've been saying that for a very long time, especially considering Gohan Beast's original design, which looked very much like an Oni from Japanese and Chinese mythology. I've been saying for a really long time that Gohan Beast, much like Ultra Ego and Ultra Instinct, is the result of his master's influence on him, Piccolo. So I think it's interesting that Piccolo suggests that he's going to try and induct Pan into the Demon Clan. And Pan, she doesn't let him finish his speech, and I think that is to signify that that's not going to fly with Pan. She's not going to end up like Gohan and be a shining example of the Demon Clan. I actually think she's going to take her own route, but I do think that she's going to be heavily influenced by Goku. But I think what's going to happen here is I think that Pan's going to start off wanting to be a superhero, and then by the end of her development, she's going to want to be a martial artist instead. Now, I saw a lot of people saying that this was a regression of Piccolo's character on Twitter, and I just wholeheartedly disagree. I think people really misunderstand what Piccolo says when he's going to induct Pan into the Demon Clan. The Demon Clan is essentially just code for Piccolo's teachings. The Demon Clan is just the principles. Because Piccolo is the leader of the Demon Clan, he's essentially just using that as a way of communicating that he is going to instill his principles, the principles of the Demon Clan, onto Pan. And he did the same thing with Gohan, and again, that explains why Gohan Beast is an extension of his master Piccolo, because it is an extension of what he learned underneath the Demon Clan, which is essentially the principles of survival. I've actually been doing a Gohan character review. If you're more interested in what exactly Piccolo taught Gohan, you can go check that out. But essentially, it's the principles of survival. So yeah, the Demon Clan stuff, it's really not that big a deal. It's not Piccolo regressing as a character. It's just him basically saying that he's going to try and instill his principles as the leader and the sole founder of the Demon Clan onto Pan. So here we find out that the police have actually been investigating the Red Ribbon Army. They know all about Hedo and all the antics that have been going on thanks to Officer Krillin, and he explains everything to them. And essentially, to me, I think this is just an attempt to answer why exactly Krillin came to the aid of everyone else in Dragon Ball Super Superhero, because he was essentially tailing everything and like keeping track of everything. Now, it's not necessarily suggested that that's the case in the film. It's actually left open-ended how Krillin found out about all of the antics going on with Cell Max and stuff like that. But this could actually explain why Krillin ended up being there to help, because he's actually been keeping track of the situation. And who knows, maybe he knew that everything would break down. Maybe he knew that Hedo would actually end up causing the destruction of the Red Ribbon Army due to the fact that he is so rebellious. Maybe this is all like 4D chess, with Krillin and the police in terms of how they're dealing with the Red Ribbon Army. But yeah, so we are back to the Red Ribbon antics. The son of the founder of the Red Ribbon Army is now going to strike again. Now, I am very excited for the manga version of these events, because people really underestimate how much one dialogue bubble can change how the fan perceives this story. Because the movie, it really moved quickly. It sort of glanced over a lot of details, and a lot of people who consume the film don't look at the film as it's in the way that they're supposed to. A lot of people look at the film as a standalone film when it's really an extension of all the events prior with the Red Ribbon Army, Piccolo and Gohan's relationship. You really have to look at everything in order to really understand what's going on with Gohan Beast and Piccolo and the Red Ribbon Army and everything. This is definitely going to create a lot of content for the channel, so if you enjoy my content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.